I think that we have gotten two fine gentlemen, and the senior one is your turn to share your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Professor Chairman. And given the fact that time is fast spent, I would want to introduce the Nigerian concept here. And just to say that all other protocol duly observed. Professor Chairman, today, the 14th of January 2019, marks the commencement of the 70th annual New Year School and Conference. It means that the New Year School certainly predates many of us herein assembled, and if it predates me, then the least I could say about the minority leader is that the institution of the New Year School would precede his own Ghanaian identity by not less than 2 decades. That one I know for sure. Chairman, the theme for this year's New Year School and Conference is building strong institutions for democratic consolidation in Ghana. And within that frame, my topic is ensuring effective legislative oversight for democratic consolidation. I'm pleased to be here today to share some experience on ensuring effective legislative oversight and the importance of quality parliamentary oversight mechanisms. Let me start by congratulating the organizers of this program for choosing the theme, building strong institutions for democratic consolidation in Ghana, and then having a panel of discussion on the sub-theme, effective oversight for countervailing authority. This, in my view, underscores the importance of legislative arm of government in any democratic dispensation. Indeed, Professor Chairman, democracy thrives where Parliament acts as the pivotal institution of governance, and indeed, Parliament is the embodiment, and may I add, the bulwark of representative and multi-party democracy. Where Parliament thrives effectively, democratic rule works. The return to constitutional rule in 1983 has helped sustain parliamentary democracy in Ghana for the past 2 decades and 6 years. We are beginning the 27th year. People say that we have already done 25 years. We have done 26 years. We are beginning the 27th year. Chairman, as you may recall, in these periods, we have witnessed some institutional developments which have improved the way Parliament works. Efforts have been made in deepening citizens' engagement and input into legislation. Parliament as an institution has come a long way in terms of its infrastructure and logistical needs. Job 600 has been refurbished to provide office accommodation for members of Parliament, as well as conference rooms to facilitate committee meetings. Parliament is gradually embracing technology where parliamentary Hansard is now put online and proceedings are broadcast on a regular basis, among others. In all this, Parliament has played and continues to play a significant role, not only in the area of socio-economic development, but also in governance system of Ghana. This has been done by Parliament exercising its traditional functions of financial control, what is otherwise referred to as the power of the purse function of Parliament, representation, deliberation on issues of public importance, information transmission, ratification of treaties, agreements, conventions, and indeed legislation, scrutinizing and overseeing executive actions, and ventilating the citizens' grievances. Ghanaians' agitation for democratic governance, including freedom of speech, rule of law, and public participation in decision-making, has increasingly been pushed to new frontiers. There is now a growing interest on issues related to accountability and transparency, as citizens want to play a more active role in shaping, delivering, and monitoring policymaking. These developments are a reflection of the recognition that the aspiration of the people constitutes the cornerstone for democratic governance and accountability, and that these aspirations should be the foremost principles to guide policy formulation and management of the affairs of government. Parliament, as the paramount institution in the democratic system of government, has a critical role to play in this direction. As a democratically elected representative of the people, Parliament has the task to ensure that the executive is made accountable in their decisions and actions which affect the daily lives of the Ghanaian people. A renege on this duty would have serious implications as it has the potential of disaffecting citizens from the entire democratic process and increasing apathy on issues of national interest. Consequently, our young democracy might suffer. The effectiveness of Parliament can partly be gauged through the proper execution of its oversight function. To help consolidate our democracy and achieve sustainable development, strengthening the oversight role and making Parliament more effective is therefore very crucial. Parliamentary oversight, to oversee, Professor Chairman, is to supervise, and an overseer is simply a supervisor. Oversight in the context just means supervision. Ironically, Professor Chairman, oversight can also mean a mistake or omission, especially one made through a failure to notice something. And I refer to the 21st century Chambers Dictionary. Parliamentary oversight is the review, monitoring, and supervision of government and public agencies, including the implementation of policy and its delivery to target citizens. It is a necessary component of the framework of government, I quote, the framework of government to secure for ourselves and posterity the blessings of liberty, equality of opportunity, and posterity. And also, quote again, the declaration and affirmation of our commitment to freedom, justice, probity, and accountability, unquote, which are contained in the preamble of the 1992 Republican Constitution. Parliamentary oversight is exercised over the executive, public operations and state enterprises, independent governance institutions, and to some extent, the judiciary. Parliamentary oversight involves the power to consider and determine the knowledge and competence or suitability and eligibility of the President's nominees for ministerial, judiciary, the Council of State, and other such public offices, as the conduct of investigation and inquiry into the activities and administration of ministries, departments, and bodies mentioned earlier by my colleague would suggest. The key functions of parliamentary oversight can be described as follows. 1, to hold the government to account in respect of how public funds are utilized, and thereby improving the efficiency, economy, and effectiveness of government operations. 2, to ensure that policies announced by the government and authorized by Parliament are actually delivered. This function includes monitoring the achievement of goals set by the legislation and government's own programs. And 3, Professor Chairman, to improve the transparency of government operations and enhance public trust in government. Now, the tools for parliamentary oversight already have been elucidated on by my colleague, the minority leader, but just to recap, the Parliament used a number of mechanisms in discharging its oversight responsibilities. Already, it's just said to you what is done by way of statements, question time, motions, and the introduction of legislation, which unfortunately our Constitution has forbidden Parliament to do. Parliament as a body, or even individual members of Parliament, what is termed the Private Members' Bill. Article 103 of the Constitution of Ghana empowers Parliament to appoint committees for the effective discharge of its functions, especially the functions of investigation, oversight, legislation, and ratification of treaties. Under Article 103(3), all committees of Parliament are vested with the power of oversight. And I want to stress this. All committees of Parliament are vested with the power of oversight. Unfortunately, whenever the oversight responsibility of Parliament comes to be discussed, the perception out there is that it is only the Public Accounts Committee that performs that function. That is a tragic observation. The Public Accounts Committee, Professor Chairman, like the functions of a pathologist, is merely a posthumous exercise. The committees of Parliament, to be relevant, are to act proactively as soon as the implementation of the budget begins. That is how oversight is exercised. Unfortunately, the committees renege on this. But talking about the Public Accounts Committee, which is established by Order 151, Sub 2 of the Standing Orders of Parliament, in accordance with Article 103 of the 1982 Constitution of the Republic of Ghana, there is an emerging trend, which, in my considered opinion, is worrying. The Public Accounts Committee uses the Auditor General's reports as its main source of information to perform its primary role of examining the audited accounts of the public expenditure of government as mandated by Standing Order 165(2) and Article 187(5) and 6 of the Constitution. The Public Accounts Committee reports to the House after the examination of the Auditor General's report with appropriate recommendations for debate and determination by Parliament. When the report is adopted, the recommendations of the House are then forwarded to the Audit Report Implementation Committees, the various MDAs, who are charged with enforcing the recommendations. The Auditor General, everywhere in the world, is a tool for Parliament in the discharge of Parliament's oversight responsibilities. It is the reason why when the Auditor General has finished his work, his own inquiries and analysis, he submits his reports to Parliament. That is as per Article 187(5) of the Constitution. Parliament then subjects the report to further analysis by debating it and then make a decision as Article 187(6) provides. The submission of the Auditor General's report to Parliament is not just for the information of Parliament. It is for a determination to be made about the rightness or otherwise of the Auditor General's conclusions. The Auditor General delves into the foreign exchange dealings of the Bank of Ghana. He should submit his report to Parliament for debate and determination. After Parliament has considered it, Parliament, under Section 17 of the Audit Service Act, has power to cause the Auditor General to revoke a surcharge on an individual or a body in the event the emerging trend where the Auditor General's findings against individuals are published before being submitted to Parliament is certainly not a good practice. At the heart of the issue of effective parliamentary oversight is the notion of relational power. To this end, the committees have been given certain procedural powers of the High Court and the power to commit for contempt under Article 122 and 123 of the Constitution. Mr. Chairman, I must admit, however, that there are some challenges to parliamentary oversight. Despite these critical oversight functions that Parliament of Ghana performs, there are quite a number of factors that affect its effectiveness. The Minority Leader has alluded to some. These deficits can be attributed to three main factors. One, constitutional encumbrances. Two, statutory encumbrances. And three, I would describe as self-inflicted wounds that Parliament has inflicted upon itself. The constitutional inflicted weaknesses begin with the vesting in the President of overwhelming and overbearing powers. The Constitution, by whatever means, has succeeded in creating a monster in our presidents. That is being blunt. I'm not talking about President Akufo-Addo. I'm not talking about President John Mahama. I'm talking about the presidency. Second, the literal nomination of the Speaker the head of parliament, by the president, who is the de facto leader of his party, for election by parliament to ensure that the president's programs are accorded smooth passage through parliament, is also an aberration. We must admit that even though parliament elects the speakers, all majority parties will receive a wink from the president to suggest to you that this is my beloved son or my beloved daughter. So that's the second matter that we should confront. And by that arrangement of appointing or electing speakers from outside parliament, you know, in the whole of Africa, it is only in Ghana's parliament that we have a speaker who is not a member of parliament. And if you have the boss of immigration service who is not, part of the ranks, but we have a major general appointed to head immigration service, the people will complain. Like they did complain in the past. And today, that matter is not holding again. So why should Parliament, the second arm of government, be headed by, so to speak, a foreigner who is not a member of Parliament? And it is the reason why speakers come and they are looking at the president. They are not looking at strengthening the institution of Parliament. Their first concern is to please the president. And again, in the sub-region, we have the ECOWAS Parliament. It is only Ghana's parliament, only Ghana's speaker who cannot be a member of the ECOWAS Parliament. All the speakers in the sub-region are members of ECOWAS Parliament. Our speaker cannot be there because he is not an elected representative. That's the reason. Our speaker cannot be part of the Pan-African Parliament because the protocol demands that that speaker must be elected. So it's only Ghana's speaker who is not part of the Pan-African Parliament. And that is a dent on us. So going forward, what do we do? Professor Chairman, there are some other matters that we can relate to. The constitutional requirement that in any executive presidential system that the majority of ministers should be picked from among members of parliament. This certainly downwarps the oversight and accountability role of Parliament. And as the minority leader did indicate, there are two main systems in the world, the Westminster system and the parliamentary and the executive presidential system. The US is the flagship of presidential systems, and UK is the flagship of the Westminster system, where in the parliamentary democracy, all ministers come from Parliament. As far as I'm concerned, that is not the problem. Because in the Westminster system, where all ministers come from Parliament, before you become a minister, you would have served as a shadow minister for donkey years and acquired the necessary competence. And so when your party, that is why they describe them as shadow ministers. They walk in the shadow of the ministries and ministers. So he served there as shadow minister for 8 years, for 12 years. He knows the bolts and nuts of that sector. So when he's made a minister, he's not found wanting. He has demonstrable competence in that sector. In the presidential system, ministers are technocrats. They are consultants, they are experts in their own field, they are appointed as ministers. The US, they describe them as secretaries. In our system, which is the hybrid, a minister is appointed or nominated by the president to become a minister with the prior approval of Parliament. And that is where the problem is. Because it has no bearing with the competence, the demonstrable competence of that person in the field that is being sent to. So he appears before Parliament's appointment committee. You ask the most rudimentary of questions in that sector, and he tells you that, please help me. Please help me to get there. When I get there, I will learn. Learn what? When the Constitution provides just two functions for ministers, that you must assist the president in running the state efficiently, and as cabinet ministers, also assist the president in evolving policies for that sector. The person you are nominating and approving tells you that he has no idea where he's going. Only heaven knows where he's going. And he's approved by Parliament to go there. So in our governance, we take one step forward and two steps backwards. And that's why I'm saying, if we want to go presidential, let's respect the rules. Let's go presidential, so that the president will be liberated to appoint experts and consultants to man our ministries. If we have to go Westminster, so be it. Even the Bible frowns on lukewarmness. It says, if you have to be hot, be hot. If you have to be cold, be cold. Don't be lukewarm. That lukewarmness is not really helping us, Professor. So we should look at that. I spoke about, we spoke about encouraging women to be in Parliament. The truth of the matter is that by Article 55(5) of the Constitution, by which we have adopted the first past post principle in our elections, we can't have many women in Parliament. It's not possible. When you adopt the first past post, it's not possible. Look at Britain. Look at Canada. Look at Australia. Look at New Zealand. Germany. All those of them, India, who have adopted the first past post, it is not possible. If you have to have many more women, let's review the Constitution, adopt proportional representation. Until we do that, it is not possible to have many more women in the chamber, or indeed the disadvantaged in the chamber. There are also some unclarity in the Constitution. The role of Parliament in the amendment of entrenched constitutional provisions lack clarity. The role of Parliament in determining the size of the President's ministers, the size of justices of the Supreme Court, among others. These should be matters of concern. And my colleague mentioned that of ministers. I strongly want to suggest, you see, and he has been a minister and a cabinet minister. The Constitution provides that any agreement that comes to Parliament should be underpinned by the principle contained in the memorandum. If you're submitting a bill to Parliament, which should be shepherded by a minister, right? It should be accompanied by a memorandum which would then explain the policy underpinning that bill or the agreement. Now, that memorandum will be signed by a minister. The Constitution provides that it is only a cabinet minister who can do that. And the Constitution provides that for cabinet ministerial appointment, the number is between 10 and 19. So what it means, technically by inference, is that a president cannot go beyond 19 ministers. Because if you are part of that group and you are not a cabinet minister, it means you cannot bring anything to Parliament, which is informed by policy, because you are not part of the policy-making group. You can't sign. And yet we entertain that in Parliament. So, Professor, let's look at these things. Because since the days of Jerry John, parliaments have accommodated this. So when it gets your turn, as the minority leader was saying, Ubon dog. So when you have articulated it behind the scene and it's not washing, when you come, you must defend it. Even though sometimes you are not afraid, but you fear small. There are some statutory impediments. Again, the minority leader alluded to some question times, motions, statements. These are instruments that we use in Parliament to oversee the executive. Parliament, our own rules of procedure, otherwise referred to as the standing orders, vest so much powers in the Speaker. And he alluded to some of the tricks that they play. First, the Speaker is the only person vested with authority to decide solely the admissibility of questions, motions, and statements. So an overly allergic speaker or a very hypersensitive speaker who cannot stand any criticisms of his government would not allow such questions, motions and statements that are critical of his party or administration. So you have had instances when the minority has, come with a motion, Parliament has been recalled to meet on it, and when the motion is to be heard, before it is heard, the Speaker makes a ruling. How can you make a ruling when there's nothing before the House? We have seen these tricks. When, as he said, a question is being asked and the minister is hot, sometimes majority leaders are referred to as coaches. So instantly you have to conjure something and tell him, go and say this. Sometimes it's not the best. And Parliament should stand together to let us know how competent a minister is. Unfortunately, the practice is different. Committees of Parliament, by our own standing orders, cannot act on their own unless matters are referred to them in plenary. So, Professor, if, for instance, there is an outbreak of cholera in any community in the country, and the Committee on Health, whose remit is that business, they cannot on their own investigate the matter. And if you have Parliament on recess, like we are on long recess, 3 months, and there's an outbreak of cholera, the Committee on Health is disabled. They can't do anything. Whereas in other jurisdictions, because they have that remit, on their own, they will go out there and investigate and submit their reports to Parliament. Indeed, in some jurisdictions, because of the competence of the parliamentary committees, in Australia, for instance, if a committee investigates anything and comes with a report, the report is not even debated in plenary. It's taken as adopted by the entire House. That's how it is, because there, the competence of that committee itself can be vouched for. Professor Chairman, here again, one wound that we have inflicted on ourselves is the numerical strength of committees. Some committees are 30, 25, and because of that, members belong to many committees. And especially when we come to the consideration of budget, you see members jumping from one committee to the other. They just want to justify their inclusion. In that regard, you have a member of Parliament serve Parliament for 2 terms, 3 terms. He has passed through Parliament, but Parliament has not passed through him. So, anytime he says anything, he's naked. Because, more or less, he doesn't know anything. So we should look at these things. Also, the structure of leadership of our committees. Elsewhere, in the entrenched democracies, what happens is that the committees of Parliament, because you see, a Parliament is as good as its committees are. Where committees are strong, Parliament is also strong. In Ghana's Parliament, after the President has taken the cream of his own party, made them ministers, deputy ministers, our colleague members of Parliament here, I beg you, I go to easy how I'm not really derogating anybody. But the truth of the matter is, as I was saying, in the entrenched parliamentary democracies, the committees, the ruling party would take some sensitive committees. Because, see, no ruling party wants to share foreign policy. So, Foreign Affairs Committee everywhere is chaired by the ruling party. Defense, sensitive. So, Defense and Interior Committees will be chaired by the ruling party. The Committee on Local Governance will be chaired by the ruling party. My colleague Haruna was advising me the other day that we should add to that list of 3 the Committee on Labor, because labor issues are very sensitive in Ghana. He told me that I should add that committee. You see, the other committees, those that are left, are then shared according to the numerical strength of the caucuses in Parliament. Unfortunately, in our jurisdiction, It's a winner takes all, even in Parliament. So all committees are chaired by the ruling party, even when you know that you don't have the people with the required competencies to chair. You weaken Parliament by weakening the committees ab initio. So, Mr. Chairman, these are some of the matters that we should relate to. Of course, I should quickly add the high turnover of members of Parliament. And we all know what is happening. Professor, I know you have years and you have 4 years. I know what goes on in various political parties. In Parliament today, we have 169 members for the majority party. 169. Of the 169, 89 of the majority caucus, 89 out of the 169 are first-time members of Parliament. It's like every year we are peeling off half and bringing in new faces. Building the competence of a member of Parliament does not take 4 years. I would suggest to you that not even 8 years. So if you continue doing that, how do you grow Parliament? How do you grow Parliament? By that. So of the 3 arms of government, deliberately we are weakening Parliament, and we turn around to say that, oh, Parliament is not doing well. Professor, that's the reality of our times. So the various political parties must be spoken to. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, I've been talking about this for a very long time, and I don't know how we are going to conquer this mountain. Because the political parties, especially the police station executives and the foot soldiers. So these are matters that really should engage our attention. Mr. Chairman, let me quickly conclude because many issues have been raised already. I believe that to ensure effective legislative oversight, there's a need to amend Article 78(1) of the Constitution, which requires the President to appoint a majority of ministers from Parliament. Article 108, which gives the power, which forbids Parliament to introduce any legislation that has financial components that will draw from the public funds of Ghana. Mr. Chairman, I also believe that if we are purposed to fight corruption, we should provide the necessary constitutional relationship between Parliament and the Auditor General. The appointment of the chairperson and other members of the Electoral Commission is something that has been engaging our attention every now and then when the President has to appoint commissioners. The opposition parties will be raising issues, but the ruling parties will be laughing. We all do know that the President must be consultative and must endeavor to embrace the public sentiments in the appointment. What should happen? I think that if we amend the Constitution, for instance, to require the President to subject the appointment of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission and the other commissioners to parliamentary approval by, let's say, an absolute majority of 2/3, a president will be forced to be much more consultative. Nobody will push him. The president would engage. And that will curtail this usual noise making whenever a president, equally to be considered is the appointment of members to SHRAG, NCC, and the other independent governance institutions. Mr. Chair, in conclusion, how do we provide an environment where there is increased capacity of the state to get things done efficiently and transparently, and governments are not only accountable to the people, but also responsive to their needs? In all these, strengthening the role of Parliament in the public policy process, especially giving priority to the relevance of policy monitoring and evaluation, will help shape and deal with future governance challenges. To grow Parliament and also the judiciary, two very important arms of government, we need to amend several provisions in the Constitution. There are many other provisions that inhibit the growth of our democracy. I propose that at a forum, such as the New Year School and Conference, we strand out such provisions, elevate them to a national debate, and sustain the discourse. Let it be in the public domain for a long time. From that national debate, Professor Chairman, would ensue a sovereign national conference to really deliberate on these issues that would have stranded out from such fora. And from the national conference would ensue a consultative, or if you like, a constituent assembly, which would engage in a holistic and comprehensive review of the current constitution. A new constitution would then consequently emerge. One referendum, Professor Chairman, would be required to approve the new constitution. If the new constitution is approved, the old one would cease to exist. It is a much better resort than the current one, which to me is taking us nowhere. It will not take us anywhere. That effort that we started, which have already consumed over $6 million, it will not take this nation anywhere. It was rather a knee-jerk approach to solving labyrinthine problems in the Constitution. Mr. Chairman, I'm confident that the discussions here will help achieve this. I wish all gathered here a happy and prosperous new year full of sunshine and abundant rainfall. Thank you very much.